People are trickling in. We will go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tori Colburn. I'm the Midwest Conservation Agronomist with American Farmland Trust, and I serve as your host for these Icon calls. Appreciate everybody being with us this morning. Um, we have a good presentation lined up for you this morning. But to get things started, I'd like everybody to just take a moment and drop your name, your organization, and occupation and location in the chat. And I think we'll go ahead and get our opening poll launched. And I want to just give a reminder to everyone that we are recording this call, and we will post it to our YouTube channel later on, so that if you want to go back and review anything that was presented today, you'll have the opportunity to do that. And if you would like to pass the presentation along to anyone else who was not able to be with us this morning, you'll have that opportunity as well. So with that, if you'd please take a moment and answer the poll for us. Okay, decent spread on our poll. Appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. So just a quick run through of our agenda for today. We have a presentation from Lorilee Schultz, Cows, Conservation, and Commitment. I'm anxious to hear her story, and then as we typically do, we'll open it up for group Q&A after the presentation, and then we have some updates from around the ISAP and ICON network. And then we also are offering CEUs for this call. So we do have a QR code available for anyone on the call who is a certified crop advisor to pick up a credit. So with that, want to just give a quick shout out and thank you to Compeer Financial for sponsoring these Icon calls. We very much appreciate their willingness to support our efforts with these calls. So thank you to Compeer Financial. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Lorilee Schultz. I suppose I will allow her to do her own introduction, and we'll get right into content for today. So Lorilee, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Tori, for that. Glad to be here with everybody this morning, sharing a little bit about what we do on our farm. So, as mentioned, my name is Lorilee Schultz. I'm a dairy farmer in Stevenson County, Illinois. I'm on my grandparents' dairy. We've been at this location for about 20 years, but they've been farming for since the 50s, basically, in Illinois. And I've been managing the dairy since 2008, essentially, and have taken over more management of the farm ground since around 2015, 2016. So just to give you a little introduction, if you want to go ahead and move slides, Kendra. So I'm kind of taking a broader view of the dairy industry. I think diversity is really our strength. You know, we're lucky that we are allowed to farm in a lot of different ways, and that we can individualize our practices to what works best on our farms. And so big or small, you know, I think all dairies have a pretty good commitment to sustainability. And you can see that in things like their Farmers Assuring Responsible Management Environmental Stewardship program that's implemented on a national level that gives some third-party oversight of our sustainability practices. And that is going into part of our commitment to be net zero by the year 2050 in the dairy industry. And even on our co-op level, they're kind of just in the early stages of trying to track what we're doing on our individual farms. Because of course, if you're not tracking it, you can't make improvements. And they're actually giving a small incentive per hundredweight of milk sold if we complete that program. And so again, you know, I think it's really great that we trust farmers to implement what's going to be practical and work on their farm, knowing that what I'm doing is going to be different than the dairy down the road. So if you want to go ahead, Kendra, I'll tell you a little bit more about our farm. So we do currently have 4 generations on the farm. My grandpa there in the middle just actually turns 92 tomorrow. And then my Aunt Kathy is on the farm. She's our calf feeder. I manage most of the cows and the crops that directly support the dairy. And then my daughter is going to be turning 4 in about a month. And yeah, she thinks she's the boss for sure. And so basically, I'm running the ground that's supporting the dairy. Um, and then we're milking 55 cows on average, sometimes a little more than that, and about 150 head total, counting all of our heifers, dry cows, a few bulls, things like that. And so that gives us about 185 animal units, which the significance of that in Illinois, the higher up you go on the number of animal units, the more regulated you are and the more oversight you have, which, is a good thing, but also like we're underneath that level. So we're not necessarily required to have things like a comprehensive nutrient management plan, although we do still follow those principles without maybe necessarily having the as formalized of a structure to that. So if you want to go ahead, Kendra, which is just to say that the bigger the farm, the more oversight there is. On our farm, we have a pretty wide variety of soil types. Some of it's really good ground, some of it's less good ground, which is kind of just to say that there's different things that we can do to help work with the land and the soil characteristics that we have. And I should preface this by saying I'm not an agronomist by any means. I'm a cow person, but I do my best to also take good care of the land that we're working with. So if you want to go ahead, Kendra, to the next slide. So on our farm, we do have several different priorities that lead into our overall sustainability goals. Of course, we want clean water. We live here, we drink the well water. Like we realize how important that is. Soil conservation, we want to keep our soil where it's at. Carbon sequestration, of course, we've all seen the impacts of climate change and doing what we can to alleviate and mitigate that. Biodiversity, you can see that's a picture of my daughter with some monarch butterflies that we just raised here a couple weeks ago. So we realized how important all those different plant, animal, insect species are to our entire ecosystem. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to preserve that. And then also resource efficiency, of course, we don't want to be using any more fuel, electricity, feed, anything like that than we have to. So a big part of our farm and working with the soils that we have is pasturing some of our cattle. If you want to advance, Kendra. And so we don't have quite enough land to have like a true intensive rotational grazing system. In the summertime, we have a group of dry cows and heifers that their primary feed source is pasture. And so we try to manage that. And then all of our milking cows have access to pasture, but aren't necessarily getting their main feed source from that. We're still feeding a total mixed ration that's corn silage, alfalfa haylage, corn, and a protein mineral mix. So again, just kind of working with what we have, the number of acres that we have. But the pasture is a really good fit for us. It allows us to cover keep a constant cover over some of our thinnest soils. I know where cow pasture is now used to be in crop production before we moved here. And you can tell that it was pretty used and abused. There's just not a lot of depth to the soils there. So keeping the pasture over it definitely helps keep our soil where it's at, but it also can help reduce runoff with the way the slope of the land is there, and is, of course, also another good carbon sink to have the crops over it all the time. Um, and you know, those all kind of lead into that it's a pretty good way to improve the health of those soils. And of course, the cows are constantly adding fertilizer to it, which is an added benefit. Um, and then with that, we also have increased biodiversity. We have quite a few different um, grasses that we're growing, and then that provides uh, shelter and food for a variety of plant, animal, and insect species. Some of the challenges that we have, I have tried to incorporate more clovers into my pasture that can be a great nitrogen fixing plants. But sometimes the challenge is that with our weed management, if we do have to go in and spray, that typically kills the clover. So I have not fine-tuned that part of it yet, but that is one of the challenges that we face. And then also shade in the middle of the summertime. We just don't have a lot of shade in our pastures um, to allow the cows to be comfortable out there. So then they do come in and spend, you know, the hottest days of the year inside the barn. And that's something that we're working to um, address with our long-term goals. So then, Kendra, if you want to go to the next slide. Just in the last few years, we have started doing more cover crops. So our primary crops are corn and alfalfa because that's what we're using to feed our cows. And we typically use almost all of our acreage for feed and don't harvest a lot to sell on the open market. And of course, we also need ground to spread the manure on. And so with that, we take about 45 acres of corn silage a year. And we just started experimenting with an oat and radish cover crop on that corn silage ground. When you're thinking about like a traditional no-till system, you know, you probably have about 3 times the wheel traffic in what we're doing versus no-till. Of course, we love the benefits of no-till, but our manure has to be incorporated into the soil. So we do have to go in and do some tillage. We're also, you know, spreading manure on it, tillage, driving over it with silage trucks, choppers, all that, that can lead to a little bit more soil compaction. And so the radishes have been a really good way to help kind of break up some of that soil compaction. Um, and then, of course, the other benefit of the cover crops that we're seeing is that, you know, when we have a dry year like this year where it's really dusty and windy, we've got something covering that soil to help keep it where it's at. And some of the things that I've learned along the way, the best success that I've had with the cover crops on corn silage ground is when we've aerial seeded it by drone about 2 weeks before harvest. Um, we've also done direct drilling into the ground, but it seems like kind of by the time that we harvest corn silage, there's just not quite as much moisture in the ground, and we haven't had quite as good of establishment as we have in the years that I did the drone seeding. So that's one thing that we didn't do it this year, and I'm regretting it. So probably moving forward, I'll try and stick to the aerial seeding. And then Kendra, if you want to go to the next slide, another feature that we've added is our pollinator patch. We have kind of a acre corner on the edge of a couple fields that it's kind of a steep hill. It's really rocky. We did roll a hay wagon there one time, so it seemed like a good place to not have to drive over. So I got a seed mix from Pheasants Forever that has 42 different plant species, very specifically chosen for Illinois. And we broadcast seeded that over the area. And now this is our going on our 3rd year now, and it's pretty much self-sustaining. Really haven't had to do a whole lot to it. And it's it's kind of neat to see it bloom different colors at different times of the year. And you've got lots of different plant and animal species that can use that pollinator patch. One mistake we did make is when we put the seed in, we just kind of dumped the bag in. But of course, I can tell in the field that we should have probably mixed that a little bit better so that we didn't have more of one species at one end of the field, and then all the heavier seeds kind of are at the other end of the field. So, and we did also put that down with rice hulls that kind of helped carry the seed. But again, just maybe could have done a little better job of uh, mixing that. So again, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you guys what we've done, and hopefully you guys can glean some information from that to use in your own operations or operations that you work with. The next practice that we've done is planting a lot of trees. Over the last 10 years, we've added over 250 trees. Um, those are primarily white oak and white pine that we put along one fence row. And then we've also added some other species that are more specific for wildlife. That would be fruit trees, serviceberry bushes, burrow, uh, those types of trees. And we kind of did this. I had a section of fence that was not in good shape that was going to need replaced anyway. So I had the idea of, hey, let's use this section here to put some trees in. And then, we're going to need a new fence at some point anyway. So uh, the idea is that long term, they're going to be able to add some shade to our pasture, another great carbon sink, and again, going into that goal of biodiversity and creating a wildlife food source. You can see actually the bottom photo there is my nephew when we planted the trees. And then that's one of those same trees that we planted about 7 years ago. And so with the trees, the most successful ones that we've had are ones that we've watered for at least 2 years, pretty consistently. If you go a week without rain, they're going to need water. Um, and so that's something you want to be mindful of when you plant trees. Some that I've just kind of stuck in here and there that I maybe haven't been so diligent about watering have not fared quite so well. I see we've got a few questions coming in the chat. I don't know, do you want me to answer those now or save those for the end?
Lorilee, I will leave that up to you. If you feel it's pertinent to answer some questions now, that's fine. Otherwise, you can answer them at the end.
Okay, maybe we'll just wait till the end so I make sure I see them a little better here. So go ahead to the next slide, Kendra. So again, back to our nutrient management, we don't necessarily have a formalized plan, but we do use soil sampling that really guides where we spread, how much we spread, and to an extent when we spread. And with that, we have been able to reduce our nitrogen use by about a third. So I feel like that's where the certainly see the benefits of incorporating manure into our crop ground, uh, and being very mindful of the soil sampling to know where we need to spread it. Our manure is mostly solid. It has a lot of bedding in it, basically, is what I mean by solid, versus more of a liquid that would be injected into the ground. And so we just spread that with a pretty typical manure spreader. And so that's, and we also spread year round. That was the other point that I was going to make. We don't have a lot of manure storage, which would be on my long-term wish list, that we could store that and spread it at more specific times. But with the size of our operation, we're pretty much scraping and hauling on a daily basis when we can. In the middle of summertime, we do basically stockpile it or compost it until we have ground available to spread on again. And if it is really wet or rainy, we'll also pile it. We have about a week's worth of storage on concrete on the dairy. And then we can be kind of strategic about not spreading it when it's just gonna get washed away right away. So with that, we have been able to track our progress over time with our soil sampling. If you want to go to the next slide, Kendra. I realized I did not do a great job of consistently sampling exactly the same thing, so I kind of had to do a deep dive into my numbers here to be able to pull this up. But you can see the two main fields that we spread on connected to the dairy. Since I've been managing the ground, we've really been able to kind of bring the phosphorus and potassium into more ideal levels and improve the organic matter and the cation exchange capacity. Again, I'm not an agronomist or a soil scientist, but the higher your CEC is, the more resilient those soils are going to be. And so anything that we can do to improve that is going to help us in the long run. So I think that the cover crops and the strategic application of manure have really helped us in those two areas. So I didn't have, we did not have early soil samples of our pasture ground, but in case you're curious, the pasture has an organic matter of about 6% and about a CEC of about 18. So again, I think that there was some soil degradation there in the past, and we're still working on rebuilding that. So go to the next slide, Kendra. Of course, to implement any of these practices, it has to be practical and at the end of the day, be profitable. And so some of the ways that I've been able to get these practices implemented is through the Conservation Stewardship Program, which has been really helpful in providing some funding, but also some support and expertise in what practices are going to be the best for our farm ground. And for me getting started, I feel like having that little bit of income from that was very helpful at some key points. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some cooperative level incentives from our, I'm a member of the Prairie Farms Cooperative here in Illinois, and we do get a 3-cent per hundredweight bonus for being part of the environmental stewardship program. So it's not huge, but it's not nothing. So I'm glad that they're providing a little bit of incentive from that standpoint. And then if you go ahead to the next slide, I was just going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had. Again, not every practice is going to work on every farm. We have looked pretty extensively into solar on our farm, which is something that we would love to be able to incorporate. But as you can see, a lot of our roofs look like this and are not facing the right direction. The slope is too steep. So and then the roofs that we do have with the right slope and the right place are farther away from our electrical control. So then you're trenching more, adding more wiring, and it just didn't seem super practical. And also the way that the incentives are structured, you need to be able to reduce quite a bit of your overall use to apply for that funding and get approved. So if we're only able to get, say, 50% of our electrical use covered by solar, we're much less competitive when it comes to grants, even though that's maybe all the more solar paneling that makes sense to incorporate on our farm. The other thing that was a little bit of a challenge on the solar is that I also asked the question to a grant writer, well, what if we were to, completely change some things? Maybe in the long term, we want to add a robot milking facility and build a new barn. What if we keep the same electrical use and add solar, but then we're doubling our production? And it doesn't it just goes on your overall usage, not the output per usage. So again, that was just from a policy perspective, a little bit frustrating that that wasn't going to get us where we needed to be either to be competitive grant wise. And then also, as I mentioned, we do have 4 generations on the farm. That can sometimes be a little challenging. I would like to include a little bit more diverse of a crop rotation, but that's been a hard sell at different times. So, and I think that also points to it. I feel like there's limited incentives to transfer land to people of younger generations sooner. And of course, we always hear about the average age of the farmer and how there's going to be this big land transition that never seems to materialize. But at the end of the day, I think anybody in the policy space that can think about how to better incentivize transfer of land ownership to younger generations that have more of a stake in implementing some of these practices, I think could be somewhat helpful. So if you want to go to my next slide, Kendra. So again, just going to do some more suggestions. I always like to say you don't have to be an expert to have an impact. I feel like I'm an example of that. I am not an expert by any means, but I'd like to think that some of the things that I've done are making a difference, which you can see in our soil sampling. It does certainly help to have a good support team. I've definitely relied on our NRCS staff on some of these and also talking with other farmers that have implemented these practices. And then just again, looking for funding sources, different state and federal avenues of funding. Carbon markets is something I'm not really familiar with, but I personally, but I think that that's going to be bigger and bigger going into the future. And then other industry-wide programs like our farm environmental stewardship program. So all of those things can help make implementing these practices a little bit easier in the short term so that we're able to gain those long-term benefits. So with that, I feel like I talked a lot really fast. So we can go ahead and answer some of the questions. Let me know what you guys think.
All right. Thank you, Lorilee. Yeah, we'll go ahead and transition to our Q&A. And for today's Q&A, we have a guest moderator for our discussion. So, Michelle Watson, I will pass it to you and let you get started with some questions for Lorilee.
Awesome. Thank you, Lorilee. Take a breath. You did great. Super job. How do you balance day-to-day dairy operations with the longer-term goals of soil and water conservation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly, on the farm, there's always things that are urgent, that are coming up. And so there again, like that kind of just helps to have those couple practices and our soil samples to just have that in the background to be kind of our constant guiding principles, so that we use that as a framework for making decisions, essentially. And, not every day is going to be perfect, but if we have our priorities that I had listed in our slides, those can kind of give a little bit of a framework to that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Your nutrient management was also super impressive. What advice would you give to other dairy operations looking to reduce fertilizer use without hurting yields?
Mm-hmm. So again, I think that that's where soil sampling really comes into play, and also sampling your manure. So not all poop is the same.
Yep.
So what are the nutrients that you're actually applying, and how can you work with your agronomists or other support people to make sure that you're matching up the needs of the soil with um, the manure that you're applying, and putting it on again strategically so that you're getting the most bioavailability out of those nutrients.
Sure. Awesome. Perfect. I know you mentioned a couple things, so I'm going to repeat this just back out because I think it's important. What kinds of policy or industry changes would make it easier for the next generation to continue sustainable farming? And I know you mentioned solar, especially if they were looking more at the output, I think you mentioned, as well as like the transfer of land. What other kinds of
Mhm.
things do you think would have an impact?
Yeah, well, I think it's also just really important to keep the some of the funding sources that are in our current farm bill with like the conservation stewardship program and more programs like that. That again, like to just do these practices without any funding, like yeah, you know that in the long run they're going to help, but when you need to make it take your balance sheet to your banker every year, you know, it's hard to make it pencil out in the short term in some instances. And
Yep.
so that having that government support, I feel like mm, helps give you a little more backing to reap the long-term rewards. And so certainly I'd like to see that we manage to preserve some of that funding and also just education. Like
Mm.
I feel like for me as a dairy farmer, it's kind of, it can be a little bit overwhelming maybe to know where to start.
Mhm.
And so, again, like I'm sure there's more things that we could be doing, but something is better than nothing. And, it's baby steps, but having more education available on, the best practices and things like that for younger farmers can be really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Final question I have, and then I'll go to the two in that are posted in the chat. You said you don't have to be an expert to make an impact, which I think is awesome. What are some common misconceptions do you think that new farmers have about getting started with sustainability?
Again, I think it's that it's the short term versus the long term. Um, it might be hard to pencil out in year one. Like our trees, for example, like they're not going to give
Mhm.
us shade for, several more years yet.
Right.
So that's a pretty long-term payback. And when, you're going year to year, on your crop loan or whatever, like incorporating some of those things can be a little tough, initially. So, but I do think that a lot of farmers and especially young farmers uh, have a vested interest in doing the right thing
Mm.
and improving our soils and improving our resilience of our soils, but maybe don't know the best way to go about that. So again, maybe could go back to a little more education there as well.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to look over into the chat. Looks like we got a question from Kevin. What forages are you doing besides corn silage? Are you TMR winter forages?
Yeah, so we do again corn silage. We do combine some corn that we use just for ground corn. And then we also about half of our land is in alfalfa. And that usually will go for 4 years plus the following first cutting is kind of what we've been doing. Um, and so, and we also sometimes incorporate wheat. Not every year. It depends a little bit on the markets where they're at, and then what straw I'll have to buy elsewhere if I do maybe have some other ground that I can spread on in summer months available from neighbors. That's another, I didn't mention that, but that's another thing that we've done is worked with some of our neighbors to be able to use some of their land to spread on to help reduce the spreading on ground that didn't need any more nutrients on it, essentially. Um, and So we do some wheat. We have not done other winter forages. Um, we've kind of thought about rye. I know my brothers are actually custom forage operators, so they run choppers and stuff, and do, tens of thousand acres every year. And they've seen really mixed success with rye, and so I've kind of relied on their expertise to kind of get a sense for how they feel it goes. I know some years it can be really good and some years it can be really bad. So I haven't jumped into that yet. And I've been really happy with the oats and radishes combination so far. And, certainly I'm excited to try some different things. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Next question I've got from Jean. She is wondering if you graze cover crops. If yes, what benefits? If not, what barriers?
So we're not currently grazing any of our cover crops. Probably the biggest barrier would be the waterway. It's not open water, but we do have kind of a buffer strip that runs between our main pasture and the field that I usually have our cover crops on. And so I don't really want cattle going through there. And so it's just a little bit of a logistics thing on that. Um, and fencing, I guess, would be the other hold up. But certainly that's something that, with could be done long term if we had, a better system to get them over the grass waterway. So in a dry
Sure.
year, it's not a big deal, but I also don't want to
Mm.
ruin our nice buffer strip there that, we've established. So
Absolutely. Jean also asked, which crops would you add to the crop rotation if you could?
yeah, so the main one probably would just be soybeans as a way to break up our corn on corn cycles to
Mm.
break up our pest cycles, that sort of thing. And yeah, I don't know why my grandpa just is like, well, we're not feeding those, or I mean, we are feeding beans, but we're getting it from the feed mill. So he just thinks we need to just grow things to feed the cows, and but I think they can be really helpful to throw in there every couple of years. And then also, we're still looking at things like rye and other cover crops. So with our stewardship program that I'm currently in, we're locked into the oats and radishes right now, but certainly would like to kind of experiment with what cover crops work best. But so far, I've been happy with what we're doing. So.
Fantastic. Looks like that might be the end of our questions right now.
I have one if I could take
Yeah.
a minute. Lorilee, you mentioned that you have some corn on corn, and that was going to be part of my question. So you have four years of alfalfa plus first cutting of year 5, is that correct? And then I assume you're planting corn after
Yeah.
first cutting. So
Yeah.
I guess maybe a two-parter. What does your nitrogen program look like in corn? And then how many years are you off of alfalfa before you go back to alfalfa hay in that field?
Yeah. So I'm not doing all of the alfalfa at one time. So it's kind of alternating. So like every 2 years, I'm planting more alfalfa. But then that kind of, I think the last group of this year I had some corn on corn for, I think this was the third year, and we definitely saw like some gooseneck stems and stuff from increased root worms. And so, um, and again, I am using about half of our corn ground for corn silage, but then half of it for ground corn, which can pretty easily also be purchased because we're actually hauling it to town. They're grinding it and banking it essentially, and then we're bringing it back. But there again, like depending on the market, sometimes you can do that cheaper just by buying it on the market than growing it. So um, that's where adding in another crop to the mix can sometimes be helpful. Um, so yeah, did I answer all the parts of your question there? I think there was something else in there that I may have
Mostly,
missed.
I'm curious about the nitrogen,
Oh,
your applied nitrogen in corn, particularly that first year, and then how does that change in subsequent years?
yeah. So definitely the first year we're able to get by with quite a bit less. And I'm probably going to get the units wrong. If it's 60 units of nitrogen after alfalfa, and then it goes up to more like 80 to 100 um, in subsequent years, if that makes sense. Again, like the agronomy numbers, I just don't have the. I can tell you how much milk that cow over there gave, and what that one's production is, and what that one's great 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 grandmother is, but the crop side, I definitely, again, I like doing it, but it's not necessarily where my passion is. But so if I got the nitrogen numbers wrong, that's why. But certainly the first year after alfalfa, we really get a good nitrogen bump from the alfalfa, and then by year 3, we're adding more nitrogen yet, and we usually apply that a couple weeks after planting. Um, Last year the co-op messed up, and I was actually out of town for a few days, and I thought they applied it while I was gone, and then came to find out they never did. So we put it down with Y drops quite a bit later, but it ended up working out in the long run. But certainly definitely need that nitrogen source, even though we are getting also some from our manure. So
Yeah, manure, and I notice you have pretty good organic matter levels based on your soil tests, so you're getting some mineralization there as well. So thank you.
mhm.
I had a question, if I can jump in the queue here. You talked about, not needing to be an expert, but knowing lots of experts, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about who is your network of experts and where are you looking when you have questions or, yeah, looking for more resources.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think other farmers are a super awesome source. Again, like having my brothers to talk to that are on, you know, many different operations throughout the year, like they have a pretty good handle on what works and what doesn't. So I usually can filter things through them. My partner also is a crop farmer. And so, he kind of got me started with the conservation stewardship program. And he does mostly no-till because he doesn't have livestock. So our ground is quite a bit different. But just kind of talking to him, like to find out the different programs he was able to get started in. Um, that was really helpful. Certainly the people at the NRCS office have been a good resource to answer questions, especially as far as actually implementing the practices. They know, like, okay, this is a great place to go to get trees. This is, a great spot to get, your pollinators, patch seed, specifically things like that. They have a lot of resources that way. And then also working with our agronomist. Um, I've kind of filtered through a few different agronomists. Not that I've had any bad ones, but just trying to find the right fit on an agronomist that has the same goals and kind of thought processes as I do. I think that can make a big difference. So again, I'm still working on that one, maybe a little bit, but those would be 3 pretty good sources. And then, just ag publications. There probably are more online resources, but I guess, probably need to look into those a little bit more. I should add, I'm also a member of the Dairy Girl Network, which is kind of an informal group of farm women across the country. And we do have like a Facebook chat group where we can share ideas. So if I'm having an issue with something, I can say, hey, like, has anybody tried this cover crop? What were your experiences? Or, another example, like I have a field that's actually kind of high in pH. And so I asked the question like, well, does anybody else have higher pH soils, and do I need to do anything about it? And so just having a place to kind of ask questions like that in a supportive environment has also been really helpful.
Are there any other questions? I'll leave it open mic. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to come off mute and ask. Otherwise, you can still drop questions in the chat as well. I'll give you a moment. If not, I think we can move on and we can wrap up for today, but I'll leave it open.
These have been really good questions, so I appreciate you guys asking them.
No, we appreciate you being here, Lorilee. This has been very informative, especially to somebody like me, a lowly agronomist who does not have much experience in the dairy world. But there's obvious agronomic benefits to what you're doing. And I guess if I can take a moment to just ask one more small question, you may not have the answer to this, but I'm just curious. When you are choosing corn hybrids, are you choosing corn hybrids for their agronomic traits, or are you choosing them based on the benefits they can bring to the dairy herd?
A little bit of both. With our, again, having corn on corn, looking for a variety with a lot of protection, rootworm and all that. But also we want corn that's going to make good silage. And so, high yield per ton, or yield tons per acre, I should say. And that's, and I wouldn't, our average bushels per acre is usually between 190 and 210. So it's not like we're nowhere near 300 bushel an acre or anything, but just trying to get a good, um, tall plants, but also a good corn to corn silage or plant matter ratio. And so a little of both, we're looking for sturdy corn that's going to last and hold up at least till chopping. But that's also going to make good feed.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, not seeing any more questions, I suppose we can move on to the latter part of today's call. We'll get things wrapped up. If we want to get our slide deck back up here. Just want to remind everybody that we look to keep growing our network. So please, if you have not, find us on all of our social media handles, LinkedIn, Facebook, and as I mentioned before, these videos are recorded and we do share them on our YouTube page. We also have a newsletter that goes out each month. So if you're not receiving that, please sign up to receive that. We appreciate the opportunity to get information out to everybody. Want to remind everybody of some of the things going on around the state here coming up in the next couple of months. Register today. There is a workshop in Monticello, Illinois. I believe this is the Fishers and Farmers. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? I'm pretty sure I read that yesterday. So just want to remind everybody that that is an opportunity coming up here in November. If you're interested, we encourage you to get signed up and attend to that. And then there's just a few other things here from around our network. I'll let you read through this. If there's anything else that anybody on the call would like to share for news or learning opportunities, events that might be coming up, I'll give you an opportunity now. Please come off mute. Feel free to share your information or your event with us. Rachel Curry has shared in the chat the NLS Partnership Conference registration is now open. So if you're interested in attending that, the registration is open, and she's provided us with a link. Thank you, Rachel. And if there's nothing else, we can go to the next. So next month, we will have another icon call. This time, so we will be discussing the ROI of controlled drainage. So we're looking forward to that. I don't recall exactly who is presenting, but it will be a good call as usual. So that will be on November 12th at 9 a.m. And I think we can go ahead and launch our exit poll. And for anybody on the call who is a CCA, we do have this QR code if you want to get your soil and water credit. I will be doing that as well. And I guess just want to extend another thank you, Lorilee, to you for presenting with us here today. Appreciate you taking the time to provide your presentation and answer questions for us. You did a wonderful job. And thank all of our ISAP partners for helping us out today. We really do appreciate all the participation, and to everybody who attended today's call. We very much appreciate you being here and offering your thoughts, and we appreciate you listening in. So until next month, thank you again. We will see you all in November. Thank you.